The first crack in my perfectly constructed life didn't sound like a splintering beam or shattering glass. It was far more subtle and infinitely more cruel. It was the sound of my husband's voice, warm and intimate from the other side of his office door, a tone I hadn't heard directed at me in years. "Don't worry, my love. It's almost over. Once the land is ours, we can finally be together. Permanently." I froze my hand, hovering just inches from the polished mahogany, a tray with his evening coffee, and the heart medication he so carelessly forgot, trembling in my grasp. The house was a sprawling, silent monument to our success in the upscale Hancock Park neighborhood of Los Angeles, and every sound carried. A woman's laugh trickled through the doorlight, melodic and utterly familiar. It was the laugh I heard at every family barbecue, every holiday party. It belonged to my younger sister, Chloe. "He's so clueless, Mark," she said, her voice dripping with a fondness that made my stomach lurch. "The trust is ironclad. He'd never suspect you'd use his own company to bleed him dry. And Alara, she's so busy playing the perfect corporate wife, arranging flowers and chairing charity galas, she wouldn't notice a freight train if it hit her dining room table." The tray clattered to the marble floor. The sound was a gunshot in the silent hall. China shattered dark liquid splattered like blood across the pale stone, and the little white pills scattered, rolling into the shadows. The murmuring inside the office stopped dead. "My name is Alara Vance. For 22 years, I have been the architect of a beautiful, comfortable lie. I am the wife of Mark Vance, co-founder and public face of Vance & Crow, a multi-million-dollar commercial real estate development firm. The other half of that name, the silent genius behind our empire, is my father, Robert Crow. Mark was the ambitious, charismatic salesman who swept me off my feet, and my father was the brilliant, trusting engineer who took him in, gave him a name, and treated him like the son he never had. And I have just learned with the clarity of a lightning strike that my husband and my sister are not just having an affair. They are orchestrating the systematic destruction of my father and the theft of everything he has ever built." The office door swung open. Mark stood there, his face a masterful mask of concern, his phone pressed to his ear as if he'd just ended a call. "Ilara, honey." "What happened? Are you hurt?" His eyes, however, were not on my face. They were scanning the floor, the mess calculating the risk. Behind him, Chloe stood by the large picture window, her own phone in her hand, a picture of casual innocence. Aunt Lydia on the phone, she mouthed, rolling her eyes dramatically. Another crisis. I couldn't speak. My vocal cords were severed by betrayal. I looked from his carefully arranged face to hers, and the last 22 years of my life rewrote themselves in an instant. The late nights at the office, the business trips Chloe always seemed to take at the same time, the way Mark had gradually over the last 5 years taken more control of the company's finances, insisting my ailing father deserved a less stressful retirement. The way he'd been pressuring Dad to sign over power of attorney to restructure the trust that held the company's most valuable asset, a vast, undeveloped parcel of land in the California desert that my father had bought for a song decades ago and was now worth a fortune. I dropped the tray. I finally whispered, my voice alien to my own ears. "I can see that, darling. Don't move, you'll cut your feet." Mark's voice was smooth, practiced. He stepped over the debris and put an arm around me, guiding me away from the scene. His touch felt like a snake coiling around my shoulders. "Chloe, be a dear, and call Maria to clean this up." Chloe gave a little salute, her eyes meeting mine for a fraction of a second too long. There was no guilt there, only a cool assessing challenge. "Of course." "You okay, Ellie? You look pale." They were a team, a unit. I was the outsider, the clueless obstacle in their path. I let Mark lead me to the living room, my mind racing, screaming, yet my body moving with a placid obedience that had become my second nature. I had built this prison myself. I had chosen the drapes, the art, the furniture. I had curated the perfect life, and in doing so, I had made myself a decorative, easily disregarded object within it. He sat me down on the white linen sofa. Just breathe, Alara. It's just a little spilled coffee. No harm done. No harm done. The words echoed in the cavern of my skull. I saw the future they had planned. My father, heartbroken and financially ruined his life's work, stolen by the man he called a son. Me cast aside the discarded first wife. And the two of them, Mark and Chloe, living in my house, spending my father's money, laughing at the clueless Alara. A coldness settled over me, a glacial calm that smothered the initial shock and horror. It was a feeling I recognized, one I had inherited from my stoic engineer father. When a foundation is compromised, you don't weep over the cracks. You shore it up, you rebuild, or if necessary, you demolish the entire structure to build something new. "You're right," I said, my voice steady now. I placed a hand on his cheek, forcing a fragile smile. "I'm just tired. It's been a long week with the Children's Hospital Gala preparations. I think I'll go up to bed." The relief in his eyes was palpable. The narrative was preserved. Silly, fragile Alara, prone to little accidents and vapors. "You work too hard, my love. I'll be up soon." He kissed my forehead, and I felt the ghost of Judas in the gesture. Upstairs in my pristine bedroom, I locked the door. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I walked to the mirror and looked at the woman I had become 50 years old, expertly maintained, dressed in cashmere and silence. The woman who had given up her own ambitions to be the supportive wife. The woman who had trusted her sister implicitly. That woman was a liability. She was a weakness they had already exploited. I opened the safe in my closet, not the one where I kept my jewelry, but the small fireproof box behind a false panel, where I stored the things that truly mattered. My passport, my birth certificate, and a single faded photograph of my father and me standing on that barren, beautiful desert land the day he bought it. He had his arm around my shoulders, his face full of dreams. "This is our legacy, Ellie," he'd said. "This is for you." They thought I was clueless. They thought I was broken. But as I stood there holding that photograph, a new blueprint began to form in my mind. They had planned their takeover for years. I would plan my counterstrike in the silence they had assigned me. I would use my intimate knowledge of this gilded cage, every financial record, every security code, every dirty secret as my weapons. Mark and Chloe had just made a fatal error. They had mistaken my quietness for weakness and my love for blindness. They wanted a war. They had no idea who they were truly fighting. For 3 days, I moved through my life like a ghost. I attended the final planning meeting for the Children's Hospital Gala, nodding and smiling as I selected floral arrangements. I approved menus with our chef. I asked Mark about his day over dinner, listening with a placid expression as he spun tales of complex negotiations and difficult clients, a web of lies woven with the threads of my father's company. But inside, I was a vault, cold and impenetrable. The initial shock had crystallized into a focused, humming energy. I became an archaeologist of my own life, excavating the past for clues I had been too trusting, too blind to see before. It started in the one place they would never think to look, my art studio. Tucked away in the east wing of the house, it was my sanctuary, a space they both dismissed as my little hobby room. They saw the canvases, the tubes of paint, the smell of turpentine. They didn't see the meticulous mind of an artist who understood composition structure and the subtle power of hiding things in plain sight. On the 4th day, while Mark was at the office and Chloe was at a spin class, a predictable routine I knew well, I went to work. I didn't touch his home office computer. That would be too obvious, too risky. Instead, I began with the physical world, the domain they considered mine, and therefore unimportant. I started with the household accounts. As the lady of the house, all domestic invoices and credit card statements came to me. I pulled out the files for the last 5 years, a period that coincided with my father's gradual withdrawal from the company due to his heart condition. I wasn't looking for extravagant purchases. That was too crude for Mark. I was looking for patterns, small recurring expenses that could be shells for something else. And I found them. There was a premium concierge and security service, billed monthly to a company called Aegis Holdings. The amount was significant but not outrageous, $4,500 a month, easily lost in the sea of property taxes, insurance, and landscaping bills for the estate. I'd signed off on it for years, assuming it was for our home alarm system and the discreet security we sometimes hired for large events. A quick anonymous online search for Aegis Holdings revealed nothing. It was a ghost, a shell company. My hands trembled not with fear, but with a hunter's thrill. This was a thread. I pulled it. Next, I accessed the cloud storage for our family photos. Mark had set it up years ago, a shared digital album where we could all post pictures. It was linked to his main email account, the one he sometimes left open on the kitchen iPad when he was in a rush. He'd gotten sloppy, comfortable in his deception. I navigated past thousands of pictures of vacations, parties, and family gatherings, a curated museum of our fake happiness. Then I found a separate hidden album, password protected. My heart hammered against my ribs. What was the password? It wouldn't be anything related to me or our life. I thought of Chloe's vanity, her obsession with her image. I typed in Chloe's star sign. Access denied. I tried Mark's birthday, their anniversary, the real one, the one I now knew they celebrated. Nothing. Then I remembered something Mark had said years ago, a throwaway comment about his first car, a beat-up Mustang he'd loved. Freedom, he'd called it. I typed in Mustang 69. The album unlocked. The air left my lungs. It wasn't filled with scandalous photos. It was far more damning. There were scanned documents, spreadsheets, PDFs of contracts. I opened one. It was a draft of a land transfer agreement for the desert property, but it wasn't from Vance and Crow to a third party. It was from my father's personal trust to a corporate entity called Solari Development. The purchase price was a fraction of the land's actual worth. Another file was a life insurance policy on my father for $5 million. The beneficiary wasn't me, his only child. It was a Robert Crow family trust, a trust I had never heard of with Mark listed as the sole trustee. The pieces clicked into place with a terrifying final clarity. They weren't just going to steal the company and the land, they were going to make my father's death a profitable event. The heart medication I so diligently reminded him to take flashed in my mind. A cold dread, colder than anything I had felt, yet seeped into my bones. That evening, I made a decision. I had to see my father. I had to look him in the eye and know he was safe. I drove to his modest Spanish-style home in Pasadena, the house I'd grown up in, a world away from the sterile opulence of Hancock Park. He was in his workshop tinkering with an old clock, as he always did when he was thinking. The smell of sawdust and oil was a balm. Ellie Bell. He said, his face lighting up, using the childhood nickname I hadn't heard in years. This is a surprise. Just felt like seeing you, Dad. I hugged him, holding on a moment too long, feeling the thinness of his shoulders through his flannel shirt. We sat in the kitchen with mugs of tea. "How are things at the office?" I asked, keeping my voice light. "Mark says you're finally letting him handle the heavy lifting." My father's smile was gentle, but his eyes, the same sharp blue as mine, were weary. "Mark is very ambitious. He has a lot of new ideas, wants to leverage the desert land, take on big partners. I'm an old dog, Ellie. I just wanted to build things that last." "Have you signed anything new lately for the trust or the company?" He frowned, thinking. "Mark had a stack of papers for me last week. Refinancing," he said, "to free up capital. I trust him, you know that. He's family." Family. The word was a knife in my heart. I wanted to scream, to shake him, to tell him everything, but I couldn't. Not yet. If I tipped my hand, they might accelerate their plan. I had to be smarter. I had to have irrefutable proof. "Just be careful, Dad," I said, placing my hand over his. "Promise me you won't sign anything else without showing me first. I may not be an engineer, but I'm good with details." He patted my hand. "Of course, sweetheart. But don't you worry about us. You have enough on your plate." As I drove away, the last of my sentimentality evaporated. They had weaponized my father's trust. They had turned my role as the non-threatening domestic wife into their greatest advantage. I was done gathering intelligence. It was time to move from defense to offense. I needed an ally. I needed someone who operated in the shadows they thought they owned. I needed to find out who was behind Aegis Holdings. Pulling into my driveway, I saw Mark's car was already home. The lights were on in his office. I took a deep breath, smoothing the expression on my face back into one of quiet contentment. The silent audit was over. The real war was about to begin. The gala was a masterpiece of illusion. The grand ballroom of the Wilshire Hotel shimmered under a cascade of crystal chandeliers. Orchids white and delicate spilled from towering centerpieces, their scent a subtle weapon against the room's underlying notes of ambition and avarice. I stood at the periphery, a vision in sapphire blue silk, my smile a practiced, serene curve. I was the curator of this evening, the architect of its beauty. And tonight I would use my own creation as a weapon. Mark was in his element, holding court by the bar, his arm slung possessively around Chloe's waist. To the world, they were the devoted brother-in-law and the charming, supportive sister. To me, they were a tableau of betrayal, their every laugh a private joke at my expense. I watched as Chloe leaned in, whispering something that made Mark throw his head back in genuine laughter. The sound grated against my nerves, but I let it fuel the cold fire in my veins. My plan was simple, audacious, and relied on their own arrogance. I needed access to Mark's phone, not the one he used for family, but the sleek black device I'd seen him slip into his inner suit pocket, the one he never let out of his sight. The one I was certain held the keys to Aegis Holdings and Solari Development. The opportunity came during the live auction. The room's attention was fixed on the stage as a luxury vacation package to Bora Bora sparked a bidding war. Mark Ever the showman was engaged paddle in hand. Chloe was distracted flirting with the elderly philanthropist in the next seat. I moved with the quiet purpose of a shadow gliding through the tables toward the restroom hall. But I didn't enter the ladies' room. I slipped into the hushed, plush-lined phone booth tucked away in an alcove, a relic preserved for its aesthetic charm. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs, but my hands were steady as I pulled the burner phone from my clutch. I dialed a number I had committed to memory after 2 days of discreet, cash-paid inquiries to a former private investigator who now ran a high-end security firm. A man named Julian Croft had been highly recommended, with a reputation for discretion and a particular skill for digital forensics. The line connected after one ring. Croft. The voice was low, calm, devoid of any superfluous warmth. Mr. Croft. "We have a mutual acquaintance, Arthur Sims." I used the name of the retired investigator, the only reference I had. "I require your services. Tonight." There was a pause, the soft click of a keyboard. Location. The Wilshire. Grand ballroom. I need you to create a distraction. Significant enough to draw a specific man's attention for 90 seconds. His name is Mark Vance. Another pause. Nature of the distraction. A medical emergency. I said the words tasting like ash. A man mid-60s in a navy blue suit. He's seated at table 12. It needs to be convincing but non-life-threatening. A severe dizzy spell disorientation. Can you do that? I have an associate on site for another matter. It can be arranged. The trigger, I'll text the word now to this number. You have 60 seconds from receipt. Understood. My fee will be paid in full upon completion. In cash. I'll arrange the drop. I ended the call. My breath misting in the close air of the booth. This was it. I was no longer just observing. I was orchestrating. I slipped the phone back into my clutch and returned to the ballroom, my smile back in place. The auction was reaching its climax. I took my seat next to Mark, placing a gentle hand on his arm. Darling, the Bora Bora package is wonderful, but remember we're saving for the Aspen house. It was a lie, a trivial domestic concern designed to reinforce my role. He patted my hand absently, his eyes on the stage. Don't worry, Alara, I have it under control. I waited. The seconds stretched like taffy. Then I felt the vibration of the burner phone in my clutch, a single prearranged pulse. It was time. I typed a single word and hit send. Now. I held my breath watching table 12. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the man in the navy blue suit, a venture capitalist I vaguely knew, suddenly swayed in his chair. His wine glass tipped splashing crimson onto the white tablecloth. He clutched his chest, his face pale. A woman at his table gasped. A murmur rippled through the crowd. My God, Mark said, his attention snapping away from the auction. Is that James? As heads turned and concerned guests began to rise, I saw my moment. Mark was half out of his seat, his body angled toward the commotion. I should see if he needs help, he muttered. Of course, go, I urged, my voice laced with feigned concern. As he moved away, I let my clutch accidentally fall from my lap. The contents scattered under our table with a clatter. Oh, clumsy me, I exclaimed, bending down quickly. In the shadowy space beneath the tablecloth, surrounded by spilled lipstick and a stray compact, I went to work. My fingers, slick with a fine sheen of sweat, found the inner pocket of Mark's jacket, which was draped over the back of his chair. The cold, hard rectangle of his phone was there. I pulled it out. My father, a man who believed in redundancy, had a master fingerprint registered on every device in our house, including Mark's for emergencies. I pressed his thumb, which I had replicated on a subtle silicone pad, hidden in a fake cosmetic compact against the sensor. The screen lit up. Access granted. I worked with frantic precision. I plugged a tiny wireless data transfer dongle into the charging port, a device Julian Croft had provided, through a dead drop at my florist. It would automatically copy the entire contents of the phone to a secure server he controlled. I didn't need to search. I needed to steal it all. The transfer bar on the dongle's tiny LED screen crept forward. 25%. 50%. I could hear the commotion at table 12. Escalating voices raised someone calling for a doctor. 75%. 90%. Alara. What are you doing down there? Chloe's voice, sharp and suspicious, cut through the din from above me. I froze, my heart leaping into my throat. I dropped my clutch. I said, my voice muffled by the tablecloth. My lipstick rolled everywhere. Well, hurry up. It's embarrassing. The LED blinked green. 100%. Transfer complete. I yanked the dongle out, tucked it into my palm, and slipped the phone back into Mark's jacket pocket. I emerged from under the table, my face flushed from being upside down, clutching an assortment of my spilled belongings. Everything all right? I asked Chloe, my eyes wide with innocent concern, gesturing toward table 12, where Mark was now helping a dazed James to his feet. She eyed me for a beat too long, her gaze flicking from my face to the table I'd just been under. Then she shrugged, the moment passing. Just a panic attack, probably. Too much champagne. Mark returned, his expression a mix of importance and annoyance. False alarm. He's fine. Let's get out of here after this item. This has killed the mood. I nodded, settling back into my chair, my clutch safely on my lap. Inside, the tiny dongle felt like a live coal. I had crossed a line. I had stolen the evidence I needed from the lion's den under the lion's very nose. But as I looked at Mark and Chloe already dismissing the incident and refocusing on their own world, I knew the real danger was just beginning. I had the data. Now I had to understand what it meant, and I had to do it before they realized their cage had been rattled. The gala was ending, but my night was just beginning. The silent war had just found its voice. The morning sun streamed into the kitchen, a liar's gold. It painted a picture of normalcy, the gleam of the espresso machine, the neat stack of mail, the gentle hum of the refrigerator. I moved through it all like an automaton preparing Mark's coffee just the way he liked it, my hands steady despite the storm raging inside me. He entered already dressed for the day, his phone pressed to his ear. "Just make sure the environmental assessment is the final version, David. I don't want any last-minute surprises before the signing." He caught my eye and gave me a tight, distracted smile. My blood ran cold. The signing. They were moving faster than I'd anticipated. "Everything all right, darling?" I asked, setting his coffee down. "You seem stressed." "Just the usual. Big deal closing." He took a sip, his gaze already drifting back to his phone. "You seeing your dad today?" The casualness of the question was a well-aimed dagger. "Yes, just for lunch. He's been a bit lonely lately." "Good. Give him my best." The words were empty, devoid of any real sentiment. He didn't see my father anymore. He saw a signature, an obstacle, a terminal condition. An hour later, I was in my car, the deli bag of soup on the passenger seat, feeling like a prop in a horrific play. I drove to Pasadena, but my destination wasn't my father's house. Not yet. I pulled into the parking lot of a nondescript storage facility a few blocks away. Julian Croft was waiting, leaning against a generic gray sedan. He was a man designed to be forgotten, average height, average build, dressed in khakis and a plain polo shirt. Only his eyes held a sharp, unnerving stillness. "Mrs. Vance," he said with a curt nod. "Mr. Croft." I handed him a set of keys. "The silver one is for the front door. The small brass one is for the deadbolt. He's an old man. He doesn't set the alarm during the day. You'll have 90 minutes. He's expecting me for lunch at noon, and I will take him out to the garden afterward." He took the keys, the medication. It's a blue diamond-shaped pill in a weekly dispenser labeled PM. It's in the kitchen next to the microwave. My voice caught. "Please, be careful." Discretion is the product. He said, his tone utterly flat. He slipped the keys into his pocket and got into his car without another word. I watched him drive away, a wave of nausea threatening to overwhelm me. I was letting a stranger into my father's sanctuary, the one place that had always been safe. I was gambling his life on the competence of a man I'd only met through encrypted messages. I forced myself to wait 15 agonizing minutes before driving the final few blocks. When I walked in, calling out Dad, "It's Ellie." My heart was in my throat. He was in the living room, a book open on his lap. "In here, sweetheart." I hugged him fiercely, my eyes scanning the room, looking for any sign of disturbance. Everything was exactly as it should be. The familiar clutter of newspapers, the ticking of the grandfather clock, the smell of lemon polish. "You're shaking, Ellie," he said, pulling back to look at me. "That dream really got to you, didn't it, Lee?" It was so vivid I whispered the truth, lending weight to the lie. "I just needed to see you." We moved to the kitchen. My gaze immediately flew to the plastic weekly pill organizer on the counter. The compartment for this evening's dose was still full. The blue diamond-shaped pill sat there innocent and deadly. Or was it? Had Julian already been here? Had he swapped it? There was no way to tell. I busied myself with heating the soup, my nerves stretched to their breaking point. Every second felt like an hour. I had to get him out of the house. "You know, it's such a beautiful day," I said, my voice too bright. "Why don't we eat in the garden? We haven't done that in ages." He agreed easily, happily. I set up a small table on the patio, all the while feeling like a puppeteer manipulating the strings of a life I was desperately trying to save. As we ate, I made idle chatter, asking him about his clock repairs, about old neighbors, about anything that would keep us outside, away from that kitchen, away from that pillbox. My phone face down on the table vibrated once, a single pre-arranged pulse from the burner. The signal. It was done. The relief was so profound it felt like a physical blow. I had to grip the edge of the table to steady myself. "You okay, Ellie?" my father asked, his kind eyes full of concern. "I'm perfect, Dad," I said, and for the first time in weeks, it wasn't entirely a lie. Just perfect. After lunch, I cleaned up my eyes, lingering on the pill organizer. The placebo was in place. My father was safe for now. But the victory was temporary. It was a stopgap, not a solution. Driving home, the high of the successful operation began to fade, replaced by a colder, more calculating fury. I had prevented the murder, but the financial destruction was still in motion. The signing for the land was imminent. I had the evidence, but taking it to the authorities would be a slow public process, and it would destroy my father to learn the truth about Mark and Chloe. I needed something faster. I needed leverage. That evening, I retreated to my art studio, the one place they never bothered me. I opened the secure folder on the burner phone, scrolling past the financial records and the murderous emails looking for something else, anything I could use to apply immediate crushing pressure, and I found it. It wasn't in Mark's files. It was in a separate encrypted file on Chloe's cloud storage, which Julian had mirrored during the extraction. It was a series of emails between Chloe and a man named Dominic discussing something called the Siren Fund. The language was vague, but the numbers were not. It was a Ponzi scheme, a high-yield investment scam targeting the very same socialite circle we moved in. Chloe wasn't just an accomplice to murder and fraud. She was running her own side operation, fleecing her so-called friends out of millions. And from the increasingly panicked tone of Dominic's latest messages, the Siren Fund was about to collapse. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. I didn't need to expose everything at once. I just needed to find the weakest link and give it a push. Chloe had built her own gallows. All I had to do was hand her the rope. The following days were a masterclass in psychological warfare. I became a ghost in the machinery of their lives, observing, calculating, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I knew Chloe's Ponzi scheme was the key. Her avarice had given me a weapon far more precise and devastating than any broad accusation of fraud or murder. I would make her destroy herself. The opportunity presented itself at a bridal shower for the daughter of one of my charity committee members. It was a lavish affair at a rooftop garden in Beverly Hills, a gathering of the very women Chloe had been scamming. The air was thick with the scent of gardenias and unspoken competition. I found her near the champagne fountain holding court. She was wearing a new necklace, a viciously sharp shard of emerald-cut diamond that I recognized from a recent auction catalog. It had cost more than my first car. She was flashing it along with a story about a fantastically lucky investment. I waited until she was momentarily alone, refreshing her glass. "Beautiful stone Chloe," I said, my voice a quiet murmur beside her. "The Siren Fund must be performing exceptionally well." She froze the champagne bottle hovering over her flute. Her eyes, when they met mine, held a flicker of something feral and panicked. "I don't know what you're talking about, Alara." "Of course you do," I said, my smile never reaching my eyes. "Dominic seems to. His emails are so descriptive. He's very concerned about the liquidity event you've been promising. The investors are getting restless, aren't they? Meredith Van Horn was just asking me if she should put more in. I told her I'd have to consult my little sister first, the financial genius." The color drained from her face. She knew. She knew I had it. The carefully constructed facade of the savvy socialite investor crumbled, leaving raw terror underneath. "What do you want?" she hissed, grabbing my arm, her nails digging into my flesh through the silk of my sleeve. "Not here," I said gently, prying her fingers off one by one. "The garden. 5 minutes, and Chloe. Come alone, or the next person I speak to about the Siren Fund will be the SEC. I turned and walked away, my heart hammering against my ribs. This was the point of no return. I found a secluded bench hidden behind a wall of flowering jasmine. The hum of the party was a distant buzz. When Chloe arrived, her composure was completely shattered. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with panic. "How did you get those emails?" she demanded, her voice trembling. "That's irrelevant." I said, my tone cool and flat. "What's relevant is that I have them, all of them. The promises of 20% returns, the fabricated financial statements, the transfers from the Siren Fund directly into your personal account to buy things like that necklace. It's all there." "What are you going to do?" The bravado was gone, replaced by the whimper of a cornered animal. That depends on you. You're going to do two things for me. First, you are going to call Mark right now and tell him you have a migraine and need to go home. You will not speak to him about this conversation. And the second thing, she asked, her voice small. The second thing, I said, leaning forward, is that you are going to resign from the board of the Children's Hospital Foundation and every other charity committee you sit on. You are going to tell people you are seeking treatment for exhaustion and a gambling addiction. You are going to disappear from public view effectively, immediately. Her jaw dropped. You can't be serious. Your reputation is a fantasy built on stolen money. I snapped, the venom finally leaking into my voice. You conspired to murder our father for a piece of desert dirt, and you swindled your friends out of their life savings for a new necklace. You don't have a reputation to protect. You have a prison sentence to avoid. The word murder hung in the air between us, ugly and final. She flinched as if I'd struck her. Now, Chloe, make the call. With shaking hands, she pulled out her phone and dialed. I watched her, every fiber of my being focused on her performance. Mark, it's me. Yes, I know. No, it's a terrible migraine. The lights. I need to go home. No, don't leave, it's fine. I'll take a car. Yes, I'll see you tonight. She ended the call and looked at me, her eyes brimming with tears of self-pity. Happy. Ecstatic, I said dryly. Now listen to me very carefully. The land deal is dead. You will make sure of it. You will find a way to convince Mark to delay it, to cancel it, to set it on fire. If that sale goes through, if my father signs a single document, I will release every email, every financial record, every damning word to the authorities, and to every single person on your donor list. You will spend the next decade in a federal prison and the rest of your life being a social pariah. You're a monster, she whispered, a single tear tracing a path through her perfect makeup. I stood up, looking down at the wreck of my sister. No, Chloe, I'm the consequence. I left her there, crumpled on the bench amidst the sickly sweet jasmine. I walked back into the party, my smile serene, my heart a block of ice. I had neutralized one threat. I had turned their alliance into a fault line. But as I accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter, I knew the most dangerous part was yet to come. Chloe was volatile. A cornered animal is unpredictable, and Mark was no fool. He would know something was wrong. He would probe. He would investigate. I had silenced the serpent, but the king cobra was still in his nest, and he was now alone, hungry and undoubtedly suspicious. The game was entering its final, most dangerous phase. The silence in the house over the next 48 hours was a physical presence thick and heavy with unsaid things. Chloe had obeyed my command with a terrifying meekness. She'd sent her resignation emails, pleaded a sudden, severe case of exhaustion, and retreated to her own apartment, claiming she needed solitude to recover. The social media feeds that were once a curated gallery of her life went dark. Mark was a caged animal. He paced. He scowled at his phone. He snapped at the housekeeper. Chloe was his conduit to the world, his confidant, his partner in the dance of deception. Her sudden absence left him unmoored and dangerously volatile. I watched him from the other side of the breakfast table, stirring my tea with a calm I did not feel. The placid wife was my armor, and I wore it like a second skin. I'm worried about Chloe, I said, layering my voice with sisterly concern. She sounded so hollow on the phone. It's not like her to just disappear. Mark's head snapped up. What did she say to you? Just that she was exhausted, that she felt like she was losing herself. I took a delicate sip. She said something odd, though. She told me to tell you that the desert project was too stressful for her right now, that she thinks you should postpone it. His eyes narrowed into slits. The mention of the desert project, the land deal, was a tripwire. She said that. Why would she say that to you? I gave a light, airy shrug. I suppose because she knows I talk to you. Maybe she's embarrassed to tell you herself. You know how she gets when she's not the center of attention. It was a perfect poisonous dart. It played on his knowledge of her vanity and his own ego. He would never believe she'd confided in me, but he might believe she was too proud to admit weakness to him directly. He studied me for a long, unnerving moment. I met his gaze, my expression one of mild, wifely puzzlement. I could see the calculations going on behind his eyes, the clueless Ilara, or a new, unknown variable. Later that afternoon, my burner phone vibrated with a message from Julian Croft. The Siren Fund has collapsed. Dominic is in the wind. Investors are furious. Chloe's name is circulating. The news broke on a financial blog by evening. It wasn't front page yet, but in our circles, it was a detonation. Socialite's secret fund goes bust. The headline read, detailing how a well-known Los Angeles personality had vanished after a multi-million-dollar investment scheme evaporated. My phone began to ring. First, Meredith Van Horn, her voice shrill with panic. Ilara, have you heard? It's Chloe. They're saying she stole millions. I feigned shock and disbelief, promising to look into it. I knew these calls were just the beginning. The ripple was becoming a wave. I found Mark in his study, standing by the window, a glass of bourbon in his hand. The dim light carved harsh lines into his face. He didn't turn around. I assume you've heard, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. I've had a few calls, I replied, standing in the doorway. It's unbelievable. There must be some mistake. There's no mistake. He finally turned, and the look in his eyes was pure, undiluted venom. She was sloppy, greedy. I told her to shut that side operation down months ago. He took a step toward me. But what's interesting, Ilara, is the timing. First, she has a sudden crisis of conscience about our business. Then her own house of cards collapses, almost as if someone gave it a push. My heart was a frantic bird against my ribs, but I forced my posture to remain relaxed. What are you suggesting, Mark? I'm suggesting that you've been very busy lately. He took another step. You've been different, quieter, or perhaps just quiet about different things. He was circling me now, a predator sensing a shift in the wind. I had to redirect his rage to keep him from looking too closely at me. Maybe she just cracked under the pressure of living a double life, I said softly, looking down at my hands. It must be exhausting, don't you think, pretending to be someone you're not, lying to everyone who loves you. The air in the room went cold. He stopped his pacing. What is that supposed to mean? He whispered. I lifted my gaze to his, and for the first time in 22 years, I let him see the steel beneath the silk. I know about the affair, Mark. The confession hung between us, a truth I wielded as a misdirection. Let him think that was the extent of my knowledge. Let him believe my anger was that of a betrayed wife, not a daughter protecting her father from a murderer. A range of emotions flashed across his face, shock, then calculation, and finally a perverse sense of relief. He could handle a jealous wife. That was a territory he understood. Ilara, He began switching to his conciliatory tone. Don't I cut him off, my voice sharp as broken glass. I don't want to hear your excuses. For years, I've turned a blind eye to your late nights, your business trips. I built this life for us, and you spat on it, with my own sister. I saw the flicker of guilt quickly suppressed. Good. Let him feel the weight of that smaller sin so he wouldn't suspect I knew the greater ones. What do you want? He asked, his voice, weary, playing the part of the chastened husband. I want you to fix this, I said, gesturing vaguely as if encompassing the scandal. I want you to clean up Chloe's mess before it splashes onto us, onto the company, and I want you to end it, permanently. If I so much as suspect you're still seeing her, I will take half of everything you have. And don't think for a second my father will side with you. It was a believable ultimatum. The wronged wife protecting her financial and social standing. He nodded slowly, buying the performance. Of course. You're right. It was a moment of weakness. It's over. He believed he had contained the crisis. He thought my revelation was my grand play. He had no idea it was only a feint, a distraction from the real war I was waging. As I turned to leave my body thrumming with adrenaline, I knew the clock was ticking faster than ever. The Siren Fund collapse would bring scrutiny. Chloe, desperate and exposed, was a lit fuse. And Mark, now believing the greatest threat was a divorce, would be moving to protect his assets, which meant accelerating the land deal. I had forced the king cobra from his nest. Now I had to be ready for his strike. The strike came faster than I anticipated. 2 days later, Mark announced over breakfast that he was taking my father to the Vance & Crowe headquarters to finally sign the desert land transfer. "It's time, Alara," he said, his tone brooking no argument. "The investors are getting anxious and your father's health is too volatile to keep delaying. It's for the best. We'll have a nice lunch, sign the papers, and it will be a weight off his shoulders." A weight off his shoulders, or the final nail in his coffin. I saw the ruthless determination in Mark's eyes. The chaos with Chloe had made him desperate. He needed this win, this massive infusion of stolen capital to secure his future alone. I simply nodded. "If you think it's best?" The moment he left, I sprang into action. The placid wife was gone for good. I called Julian Croft. "It's happening today, at the office. I need you there." "I'll be in the lobby," he replied, "and I've brought a friend from the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit." The Siren Fund collapse has their attention. Next, I called my father. "Dad, don't sign anything, not a single page. Do you understand, Ellie, what's going on?" Mark said, "Mark has been lying to you, to both of us. Just promise me." "No signatures. I'm on my way." I dressed not in my usual soft silks, but in a severe black tailored suit. I pulled my hair back into a tight chignon. I looked in the mirror and saw not a society wife, but a CEO, the CEO of my own revenge. When I walked into the gleaming lobby of Vance & Crowe, I saw Julian standing near a potted fern, accompanied by a severe-looking woman in a dark pantsuit. He gave me a nearly imperceptible nod. I didn't take the elevator to the executive suite. I went straight to the boardroom. I could hear Mark's voice, smooth and persuasive, through the door. "And this last one is just a formality, Robert. Transferring the land into the new corporate entity so we can secure the development loan. It's the key to everything." I pushed the door open. The scene was a perfect tableau of betrayal. My father, looking small and confused, sat at the massive mahogany table, a gold pen in his hand. Mark stood over him, one hand resting paternally on his shoulder, pointing to a line on a thick document. Their lawyer, a man named Higgins, who was on Mark's payroll, sat nearby. Alara, Mark said, his voice a mix of surprise and irritation. "This is a private meeting. It's family business," I said, my voice cutting through the room like a scalpel. "And I'm family." My father looked up, relief and confusion warring in his eyes. "Ellie, what's this about?" "It's about the fact that this isn't a land transfer for a development loan, Dad." I walked to the table, my heels clicking decisively on the polished floor. "It's a sale to a shell company called Solari Development, which is owned by Mark and Chloe. They're buying your land, the cornerstone of your life's work, for less than 1/10 of its value." Mark's face went white with fury. "That is an outrageous lie, Robert. She's hysterical. She's jealous of my relationship with Chloe, and she's trying to sabotage the company." Jealous, I let out a cold, sharp laugh. I turned to Higgins. "Check the beneficiary on the life insurance policy you drew up for my father, the one Mark asked you to keep quiet about. Is it the Robert Crowe Family Trust with Mark as the trustee?" Higgins paled, his eyes darting to Mark in panic. "And while you're at it," I continued, my gaze locked on Mark, "why don't you explain the monthly multi-million-dollar transfers from company accounts to Aegis Holdings, the consulting fees that ended up in your private Swiss account?" Mark's mask of control shattered. "You bitch," he snarled, taking a step toward me. "You've been snooping through my things. I've been saving my father from a viper," I said, not flinching, "and from the poison you and Chloe were feeding him." The word poison hung in the air, sucking all the oxygen from the room. My father stood up, his hand trembling as he pointed at Mark. "Is this true? You were making me sick." The door to the boardroom opened again. Julian Croft and the FBI agent walked in. Mark Vance, the agent, said, flashing her badge, "I'm Special Agent Miller with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We'd like to ask you some questions regarding the Siren Fund Ponzi scheme, the fraudulent conveyance of assets from Vance and Crow, and conspiracy to commit murder for hire." Mark stared, his mouth agape, his empire collapsing around him in the span of 60 seconds. He looked from the agent to my father's heartbroken face to my icy, triumphant gaze. "Murder for hire," my father whispered, sinking back into his chair. "The doctor and the pharmacist are already in custody," I said softly, going to his side and taking his hand. "They confessed everything. They were going to make it look like a heart attack." The rest was a blur of chaos. Mark was read his rights and led away spitting curses at me. Higgins was taken in for questioning. My father and I were left alone in the silent, opulent boardroom, the unsigned documents spread before us like the ruins of a fallen city. He looked old, so old. The betrayal was a physical wound. "My own son," he murmured, though Mark was no son of his. And Chloe, my little girl. "Why? Because some people are empty, Dad," I said, holding his hand tightly. "And they think they can fill the void with what belongs to others." In the weeks that followed, the fallout was immense. Mark and Chloe were indicted on a raft of charges. The story was a media sensation: the handsome entrepreneur, the socialite sister, the plot to kill the kindly old father. They became symbols of greed and depravity. My father, though heartbroken, was resilient. With the poison out of his system and the truth revealed, his health began to improve. We spent our days in his workshop not talking much, just being together, rebuilding the trust that had been so nearly destroyed. I didn't take over Vance and Crow. I let my father dissolve it, selling its assets and paying back every creditor in full. The desert land remained his, our legacy intact. One afternoon, I was in my art studio, finally painting for the first time in months. I was covering a canvas with bold, sweeping strokes of color, no longer the delicate, pretty pictures of before. This was fierce. This was alive. My father came in, watching me for a while. "You know," he said quietly, "I always thought you were the strong one. I just never knew how strong." I put down my brush and smiled at him, a real, genuine smile that reached my eyes. I learned from the best. I had gone into the gilded cage a naive girl. I had emerged a warrior. The world of charity galas and society whispers held no more interest for me. I had a new purpose. I used my knowledge of that world and the fortune I'd secured from the dissolved company to start a foundation for the victims of financial fraud and elder abuse. The house in Hancock Park was sold. I bought a smaller, sun-filled home near my father with a studio that looked out onto the mountains. The silence there was no longer oppressive. It was peaceful. It was mine. Sometimes in the quiet of the evening, I would think of Mark and Chloe facing the long, cold years in prison. There was no satisfaction in it, only a grim sense of justice. They had chosen their path. I had chosen mine. And mine was just beginning.